All right, let's talk about the covered cast iron, the enameled cast iron piece. This one is a shallow piece, but quite wide. So it's a rounded square, which gives you a little bit more space. And it's enameled so that it is easier to cook on. It's not as rough, but it still browns beautifully and conducts a lot of heat, but it's not safe on a campfire. But you can use it in your oven hot, lid on, lid off, whichever you like. And you can also use it on your stovetop, which gives you a tremendous amount of flexibility. So what I'm gonna do today is cook a roast, and I'm going to add potatoes and turnip and carrot to it later. So what I've done is I have dry brined and dry aged my cut of beef, and this is just a pot roast, so a cheap roast, but you can see it's dark, and the reason it's dark is because it's been dry aged and it's been dry brined. So I salted the surface of all the surface, and it's been sitting in my coatings tray in the fridge in its own little area so that there's no contamination, and it just sits here. And so it actually retains moisture really beautifully, and it just tastes so good all the way through, and it is the easiest thing to do. So I'm just gonna throw this in here. Now you can see what's important, I think, here is the size, the surface area of the meat compared to the pan. So if I put it in here, you can actually see it in the pan. Just let it fall out. There we go. Shake it to get it in there so I don't have to touch it. All right, so you can see that there's still plenty of space around the roast. And that's what I'm looking for, because I'm gonna cover this because it's a roast that needs tenderizing. So it is not a roast that I'm gonna cook medium rare. It's not a prime rare. So I'm gonna put the lid on, and I'm gonna cook it in the oven at a hot heat initially, and then I'm gonna turn it down. So I'm gonna start it at like 400, and I'm gonna turn it down to 350. And then it's just going to sit in there for a couple of hours, and I'm gonna check on it. And here's the thing, when you start to learn to cook with your nose, with all your senses, you're going to find that you smell it, and you can smell it browning in there. And for a while it won't. And this is kind of a cheater way to do a roast without browning it in the first place, but it's messy, and I would rather not have to clean my stovetop if I don't have to. So I'm gonna put it in there and use some heat, but leave it covered, which will help it tenderize. But because there's a lot of bare surface area, and I'm not adding any water or any liquid to the thing, some of the liquid from the roast is going to come out, and then it's going to brown on the bottom of the pan when I leave it in there long enough, and that's when I'm gonna start to smell it. And the surface of the roast is gonna start to brown as well. That's where all the flavor comes, and that's where your gravy is gonna come from. So don't take your roast out until it has had a chance to start to brown the pan and brown the surface of the roast. And you may need to, depending on how it's going, take the lid off and cook it for a while without it, or put a convection on it. So now I'm assuming when I'm talking about roasting it, putting it in the oven and roasting it, that we're talking about bottom element in the oven, okay, not convection heat. I don't know what that will do necessarily, but I'm using bottom heat so that I get browning on it. So yeah, so you'll find that it will, if it's too crowded, meaning the amount of roast, so if you put 2 in there or a really big one and there's not a lot of area around it, it doesn't have enough time to reduce and start to brown, because when there's so much water, it can't brown when there's water. So when there's not a lot of water in there and it starts to brown the edges, it's nice and hot, that's where your flavor is going to come from. That's what we're looking for. And right about that time is where I'm going to add the vegetables. And the remaining steam in there is going to, and because they're covered, it's going to be enough to soften them, but not enough to wreck the gravy. That's the little magic we're looking for. So we're not going to add the veggies till our pan does not have very much juice in it, like maybe a little bit of juice in the bottom, and it's browning and the roast is browned. that's when we add the veggies. They need about an hour. So we're gonna do about an hour, take a look at it, maybe a little bit more, and then add the veggies and then let them finish, and then it's ready. We'll take the veggies out, we'll take the roast out, we'll make gravy right on the stovetop in the pan, just putting some flour right on there, just really finely with that flour sugar shaker thing that we have, whatever it's called. And then the whisk, and it will, you probably don't even need to add any liquid. You'll just thicken it, let it boil on the stovetop, and serve it, and it'll be the easiest, most delicious thing. And you'll be able to do a roast on a weeknight. How cool will that be?